October 2025. In the middle of harvest season, the once busy CLAAS combine plant in Omaha, Nebraska sits unusually quiet. The welding torches are off, the conveyors still, and the shipping crates now read a new label: Made in Germany. For decades, this plant supplied Canadian farmers with CLAAS combines, machines worth millions, critical to harvesting across Saskatchewan and Manitoba. But this autumn, CLAAS confirmed a major shift. It will no longer manufacture equipment for the Canadian market in the United States. Production is being moved to Harsewinkel, Germany, where the company can export directly to Canada under the Canada-European Union Trade Agreement, CETA, a deal that eliminates nearly all tariffs between Canada and the EU. According to the European Commission, CETA has removed tariffs on 98% of goods traded between Canada and the EU since 2017. In contrast, U.S. exports face a maze of new duties. Since his 2025 return to the White House, Donald Trump has imposed tariffs ranging from 25% to 50% on steel, aluminum, and machinery components, arguing this would bring jobs back to America. But now that policy is driving companies away instead. Trade analysts told Bloomberg that European exporters can now serve Canada more cheaply than U.S. manufacturers can. A striking reversal of Trump's goals. 4,000 miles by sea has become cheaper than 400 miles by road. And what was meant to rebuild American manufacturing is, instead, hollowing it out. You're watching Maple State, where we examine how global decisions ripple through North America, calmly, factually, and without political spin. If you're new here, subscribe and help us reach 1,000 subscribers and 500 likes. Now let's look at the bigger picture, and why CLAAS's decision marks more than just one corporate move. When Donald Trump returned to power in early 2025, his administration doubled down on tariff-based economics, reintroducing high import duties on foreign steel, aluminum, and industrial machinery. The White House called it a strategy to restore American independence. But across the border, Canada had already spent years preparing a different path. Through the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, Canada secured open trade with all 27 EU nations, including tariff-free machinery imports from Germany, France, and Italy. For a multinational like CLAAS, which produces combines worth over $1 million each, that single agreement changed everything. Exporting from Germany is now cheaper, safer, and politically stable, while shipping from Omaha involves unpredictable trade tensions. As CBC News reported in a July 2025 segment, Canadian importers are increasingly relying on European machinery as U.S. products face uncertain tariffs and shipping delays. For Canada, the benefit is clear. Farmers still get their equipment, and Ottawa gains stronger European ties. For the U.S., the cost is becoming impossible to ignore. Hundreds of skilled jobs lost, and billions in potential exports rerouted across the Atlantic. As the USMCA agreement approaches its 2026 review, global investors are quietly asking a new question: is Canada now the safer bet? And for the first time in decades, the answer, economically, might be yes. Inside the Omaha plant, more than 400 positions are being phased out. Company officials insist production is only shifting, not closing, but the numbers tell another story. Shipping from Hamburg to Halifax costs less than moving freight trucks through U.S. customs into Saskatchewan. Why? Because tariffs now apply not only to finished machines but to many of their parts: engines, gearboxes, steel frames. Under CETA, those parts glide across borders duty-free. Under U.S. policy, they face unpredictable surcharges announced tweet by tweet. Trade economists describe it as a textbook backfire. The European Commission notes that since 2017, CETA has eliminated nearly all tariffs on industrial goods. What began as a diplomatic agreement has become a lifeline for exporters fleeing volatility in the U.S. So while Nebraska's assembly lines fall quiet, Canada receives the same machines, just shipped with a European flag. A policy meant to reshore industry has instead offshored it twice. The CLAAS episode is not alone. Automakers, pharmaceutical firms, and lumber suppliers are all reassessing their North American footprints. The next renegotiation of the USMCA, scheduled for 2026, looms like a storm cloud. Businesses crave stability. Without it, investment flees. Analysts at the OECD warn that uncertainty has already cut cross-border capital flows by nearly 15% since the start of 2025. By contrast, Canada's trade map keeps expanding. New agreements with Indonesia and Mexico promise tariff-free corridors stretching from the Pacific to the EU. Ottawa doesn't need to fight a trade war. It simply keeps its doors open while Washington keeps slamming them shut. The contrast grows sharper each month. One nation raising barriers, the other building bridges. When critics accused Mark Carney of jetting around the world without tangible results, he answered with a list of signed partnerships. At a press conference in London, Carney calmly replied, "In June, Canada signed the EU Strategic Partnership for the Future. Last week in Mexico, we launched a Canada-Mexico Action Plan. And here in the UK, I'm meeting global investors to attract new capital to Canada." Behind the measured tone lies a clear strategy. Carney's government has cut personal income taxes for 22 million Canadians, reduced capital gains rates, fast-tracked approvals for AI, critical minerals, and energy projects, launched Build Canada Homes to double construction speed. While Trump's tariffs shake investor confidence, Carney's reforms signal predictability. International funds seek exactly that. A London-based infrastructure investor told Reuters this summer, "Canada has become the grown-up room of the G7. Each policy feeds a single narrative, that Canada is the stable alternative to America's volatility. Nowhere is that contrast clearer than in energy. In Powell River, BC, a local company sought a 30-year license to export hydropower to the U.S. until 2055. What seemed routine sparked outrage. Indigenous communities and business groups protested, arguing that electricity should fuel local industry first. Their timing is symbolic. The U.S. Department of Energy warns that by 2030, Americans could face up to 800 hours of blackouts each year, more than a month without power. Trump's metal tariffs raised the cost of new transmission lines and renewable projects, slowing America's grid expansion. Now Washington looks north for relief, just as Canada learns to say no. The more tariffs push up costs, the more leverage Canada gains over its energy exports. While these economic shifts unfold, President Trump stands before world leaders at the United Nations, turning diplomacy into theater. "Countries are going to hell," he declares before boasting, "I've been right about everything." Laughter ripples through the chamber. The speech makes headlines, but for its spectacle, not its substance. Moments later, Trump privately assures the UN Secretary General that the U.S. is 100% behind the organization. The contradiction mirrors his trade policy: public aggression, private confusion. As the cameras pan over delegates' amused faces, another picture forms across the border: empty factory lots, delayed energy projects, fading tourism. The divide between rhetoric and reality has never been wider. The human cost is showing. Statistics Canada reports that Canadian return trips to the U.S. fell 32% in July 2025 compared with the previous year. Day trips for shopping or gas are down 35%, air travel 16%. For 2 straight months, more Americans have visited Canada than Canadians the United States, a reversal unseen in decades. The U.S. Travel Association estimates that Canadian visitors spent nearly $20 billion in 2024, supporting 140,000 American jobs. Those dollars are now evaporating. Tour operators in upstate New York call it a summer of silence. Air Canada's revenue on U.S. routes dropped 11% last quarter. Border towns report shuttered diners and half-empty parking lots. Tariffs may sound abstract in Washington, but here their echo is painfully real. Every lost traveler is a lost income. Across every sector, manufacturing, energy, tourism, the pattern repeats. Tariffs meant to project American strength are exporting its opportunities. Meanwhile, Canada's measured diplomacy is paying off. By diversifying trade and courting investment, Ottawa is collecting the dividends of calm policy. The lesson is not ideological, it's practical. Stability attracts capital. Volatility repels it. In Nebraska, the last CLAAS combined leaves the factory floor, destination Hamburg. In Saskatchewan, farmers wait for that same machine to arrive from Europe, duty-free. Between them lies the story of two nations moving in opposite directions. One builds barriers in the name of control, the other opens doors in the name of growth. And as the sun sets over empty American assembly lines, one question lingers. If protectionism was meant to rebuild America, what happens when protection becomes isolation? You've been watching Maple State, where global policy meets everyday life. Subscribe, comment, and share your thoughts. Our goal: 1,000 subscribers, 500 likes, and your best comment pinned below.